This painting has been hanging in one of the most visited museums in the world for 350 years. Millions of people have looked at it, photographed it, studied it, and all that time, an object on the floor, perfectly visible, was hiding something almost nobody knew how to read. Today we are going to look at that painting for real, probably for the first time. Part 1. The painting you think you know. The painting is called The Milkmaid, in English, The Milkmaid, or more precisely, The Kitchen Maid. Johannes Vermeer painted it in Delft, in the Netherlands, around 1658. If you have ever seen a reproduction, you know exactly what we are talking about. A woman standing, a yellow apron, a clay jug tilting over a bowl, bread on the table, light coming in through a window on the left. That is all. A domestic scene, an everyday moment, apparently without any mystery. The Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, where the original hangs, describes it as one of the greatest attractions of the museum. It hangs in the Gallery of Honor, alongside the great treasures of the collection. It has been there since 1908. Before that it passed through auctions, through private collections, through centuries of admiration, and throughout all that time the official reading was always the same, a humble working scene, elevated to sublime art by Vermeer's mastery of light. That reading was not wrong, but it was incomplete, because on the floor of that painting there is an object, a small object, an object that in the 17th century any Dutch person would have recognized instantly, and that today, 400 years later, almost nobody knows how to interpret. When you understand what that object means, the entire painting changes. Part 2. The man who painted 36 pictures and disappeared. To understand the mystery, you first need to understand who Vermeer was. Johannes Vermeer was baptized on the 31st of October, 1632, in Delft. He died on the 15th of December, 1675, also in Delft. 43 years of life. In that time he completed, according to current records, around 36 paintings. 36 in 43 years. That is less than one painting per year. Why so few? Because he worked slowly and with an obsessive precision. Every painting was an act of extreme patience. Layer upon layer of paint, light studied in minute detail. He used expensive pigments, the finest available, and he almost certainly earned most of his income through means other than painting. His father ran an inn and was an art dealer. Vermeer probably inherited both businesses. He painted, but not solely to make a living from painting. His circle was small. In fact, up to half of his entire known output was acquired by a single local collector, a man named Peter van Rooyen, who lived in Delft and became his main patron. Vermeer was not a famous artist across all of Europe. He was extraordinarily appreciated by a few people, in a small city, during a short period. In 1653, he joined the Guild of Painters in Delft, and that same year, he married Catharina Bolnes, a woman from a Catholic and relatively well-off family. Vermeer was Protestant. They had 14 children. 14. And yet by 1672, Vermeer was already in serious financial trouble. When he died in 1675, he left behind debts. He left his wife and children in poverty. And then came the silence. For almost 200 years, Vermeer was largely forgotten. The rediscovery came in the 19th century, mainly thanks to a French art critic named Théophile Torre-Berger. His efforts to identify Vermeer's paintings and the admiration he expressed for them in his writing awakened public interest in the artist. Torre-Berger was the one who gave Vermeer the nickname he still carries today, the Sphinx of Delft. Because very little was known about him, few paintings, no known drawings, no definitive portrait, There is only the possibility that a three-quarter profile figure in an early work called The Procuress might be a self-portrait. Only a possibility. Today, among the great Dutch masters of the 17th century, Vermeer holds second place in worldwide renown, only behind Rembrandt. But it took him 2 centuries to get there. Part 3. What half of his paintings have in common? Before we get to the object on the floor, there is something else you need to know about how Vermeer painted. Pearls appear in 18 of his 36 paintings, exactly half of his output. That is not a coincidence. Vermeer used objects with intention. Every element in one of his paintings was placed with purpose. Light always entering from the left. Fabrics rendered with almost tactile precision. Objects on tables. Paintings hung on background walls. Details on floors. Nothing was decorative by accident. There are also strong indications that Vermeer used a camera obscura, an optical tool that projected images onto a flat surface, which he could use to plan the arrangement of his compositions. There is no definitive proof, but there are consistent academic arguments. What we do know is that his compositions are exceptionally calculated. The geometry of the light, the arrangement of the figures, the foreground objects that balance the scene. Everything that appears in a Vermeer is there because he wanted it to be there. And that makes the object on the floor of the Milkmaid all the more important. Part 4. The object on the floor. Look at the painting carefully. Bottom right, on the floor, behind the maid, almost at the lower edge of the composition, there is a small wooden box with a grate. It is a foot warmer, in Dutch, a voetenwarmertje. A foot warmer was exactly what its name suggests. Small wooden box with a container inside, filled with burning coals, that women used to keep their feet warm during Dutch winters. It was placed on the floor, under their skirts, when they were sitting down. Beside it, on the Delft tiles decorating the lower part of the wall, there are 2 painted figures. One of them represents Cupid, the Roman god of love and desire. So far, everything seems innocent. A domestic detail, a decorative ornament on the tiles. But the question that art historians have been asking for decades is this: why is that foot warmer there? Because the maid is standing, not sitting. She is not using the foot warmer. She does not need it at that moment. And in other Dutch paintings from the same period, the foot warmer always appears being used, with a woman's foot resting on it while she sits. Here it is on the floor, set aside, apparently unused. That makes it a symbol. Art historian Walter Liedtke documented that the foot warmer was frequently used by Dutch artists as a symbol of female sexual awakening. Precisely because, when placed under a skirt, it warmed the entire body from the waist down. It was not a dark or scandalous symbol for the era. It was a well-known iconography, used regularly. British art historian and lecturer Serena Kant describes it this way: the coals enclosed inside the foot warmer could symbolize the heat of lust in tavern or brothel scenes, or the burning but true hidden passion of a woman for her husband. And the foot warmer in the Milkmaid is reinforced by what is directly behind it. The tiles with the image of Cupid, not somewhere else on the wall, there, next to the object. Is this what Vermeer intended? Was he building a veiled portrait of a working woman whose interior life holds a contained desire? Academics debate, but there is an additional detail that complicates things even further. In the same painting there is another symbol with the same type of reading, the wide-mouthed jug on the table, which in 17th century Dutch art was frequently used as a symbol of female anatomy. A foot warmer, a Cupid on the tiles, a wide-mouthed jug, all in the same painting, all in an apparently innocent scene of a woman serving milk. Vermeer was meticulous. Vermeer was calculated. And Vermeer had lived in a visual culture where these symbols had their own language that his audience could read without effort. Part 5. What the X-rays found underneath. But the story does not end with what Vermeer painted. We also need to talk about what he erased. In 2023, the Rijksmuseum held the largest Vermeer exhibition in history. 28 of his 37 paintings brought together in one space. 650,000 visitors in 115 days. Visitors from 113 nations. The museum's previous record had been set by the late Rembrandt exhibition in 2015, with just over 520,000 visitors in 3 months. Vermeer surpassed it by a wide margin. Resale tickets for the exhibition sold for as much as $2,724 a pair. For that exhibition, the Rijksmuseum assembled an interdisciplinary team of conservators and scientists to analyze the paintings using advanced technologies. 2 techniques in particular. The first, reflectance imaging spectroscopy, known as RIS. Using a device, researchers illuminate the painting and take photographs that reveal information about overpaintings and the pigments the artist used. The second, macro X-ray fluorescence mapping, known as MAY-XRF. This tool also reveals underlying layers of paint. It was invented by the Axis Research Group at the University of Antwerp and later commercialized. The Rijksmuseum's own research team uses it today. What did they find when they applied these techniques to the Milkmaid? They found that the apparently firm and balanced composition Vermeer left behind was not predetermined. The artist had already been working on the painting for some time when he decided to change it, and what he changed is significant. Behind the maid's head, there had once been a shelf with hanging ceramic jugs, the same type of shelf that was described in the estate inventory drawn up after Vermeer's own death. He sketched it in black paint at the start of his composition, and then concealed it under layers of pale paint. He painted over it with a blank wall, and in the lower right of the painting, where today we see the foot warmer, there was originally a basket, woven with wicker stems, according to the Rijksmuseum's analysis. The type of basket that also appears mentioned in Vermeer's own estate inventory. Vermeer erased it, and in its place he put the foot warmer. That decision is crucial. It was not an oversight. It was not a corrected mistake. It was a deliberate choice. Vermeer removed the wicker basket, which was a neutral, functional object with no particular symbolic weight. And, in its place he put the foot warmer, the object carrying all the symbolic weight we just described, exactly next to the Cupid tile. These technological discoveries, in the words of Rijksmuseum director Taco Dibbets, bring viewers ever closer to this mysterious and beloved artist, because they reveal the process. They reveal the doubts. They reveal the decisions. And in the case of the Milkmaid, they reveal that Vermeer actively chose to place that symbol exactly where it is. Part 6. The pattern. This is not an isolated case in Vermeer's work. It is a pattern. At the Gemäldegalerie Alte Meister in Dresden, Germany, there is another painting of his. It is called Girl Reading a Letter at an Open Window. For centuries, it was interpreted as an intimate and somewhat melancholy scene of a woman reading a letter in front of a plain, undecorated wall. X-rays carried out in 1979 revealed that wall had not always been empty. Beneath the paint, there was an image of Cupid, but for decades, it was assumed that Vermeer himself had painted over it to simplify the composition. In 2018, when the Dresden conservators began removing layers of 19th-century varnish, they discovered something that completely changed that interpretation. The paint properties in the central section of the wall were different from the rest of the painting, and between the Cupid and the layer covering it, there were traces of binding medium and a layer of accumulated grime. The conservators concluded that several decades must have passed between the completion of one layer and the addition of the next. which meant Vermeer could not have painted over the Cupid himself. Someone did it after his death. In 2021, the restoration was completed. The naked Cupid became visible again, and what was once believed to be a somewhat somber depiction of a young woman reading by a window is now a love portrait. The woman is not reading just any letter, she is reading a love letter, with Cupid visible in the background. Two paintings, the same type of symbol, the same type of reading, and in both cases, technology revealed what was hidden or had been hidden. Except that in the Milkmaid, nobody hid anything. The foot warmer was always there, in plain sight, visible since 1658. What was hidden was not the object. It was the knowledge to read it. Part 7. What the 1658 audience knew. Here is the point that changes everything. When Vermeer finished The Milkmaid, around 1658, the small circle of collectors who saw it needed no explanation. The foot warmer was a well-known symbol in Dutch art. Cupid tiles were common decoration in Delft homes. The combination of both elements in the same corner of the painting was a visual conversation in a language his audience spoke fluently. And the proof that the painting was prized even in Vermeer's own lifetime is in the numbers. When Vermeer's estate was settled after his death, in 1696, the Milkmaid fetched 175 guilders at auction, the highest price of any painting in that sale. His contemporaries knew it was extraordinary. Then came the forgetting, 2 centuries of silence. And when Thoreberger rediscovered Vermeer in the 1860s, he presented him to the modern world through a 19th century lens, an era that admired 17th century Dutch art for its technique, its light, its realism, but no longer with the visual dictionary that allowed you to read its symbols. So the painting was admired, it was studied, it was photographed millions of times. But the foot warmer was reduced to a domestic detail, an accessory, a minor curiosity. Nobody erased it, nobody hid it. We simply forgot how to read it. Part 8. The Sphinx of Delft. There is something deeply fitting about Vermeer having received that nickname, the Sphinx of Delft. No drawings of his exist, no definitive portrait, only the possibility of a partial self-portrait in an early work. 14 children, and almost no personal trace outside notarial records. A man who spent 43 years in the same small city, who painted fewer than 40 pictures, who died insolvent, and who still produced some of the most recognizable images in the entire history of Western art. For more than 300 years, nobody knew the exact location of the house depicted in The Little Street, another of his most famous paintings. It was only in 2015 that an art historian successfully identified the exact spot in Delft where Vermeer had painted that scene. 300 years later, the great 2023 exhibition, according to the Rijksmuseum itself, led to new research that brought more knowledge about his working process, his knowledge of optical tools, the context in which his art was created, and his life in Delft. More knowledge. In 2023, about a man who died in 1675, and yet a painting that has been in the Rijksmuseum since 1908, that millions of people have seen in person, was still hiding a visual conversation that only in recent years academic and technological research has managed to articulate clearly. Taco Dibitz, director of the Rijksmuseum, said that Vermeer is the artist of serenity and intimacy. And perhaps that is exactly why he has been keeping his secrets for so long. His paintings seem closed, complete, serene. They do not invite questions because they appear to have all the answers on the surface. But the surface is a trap. Part 9. What the painting has to say today. Let us go back to the painting. A maid standing. Bread on the table, golden light coming in from the left. The most domestic scene imaginable. And on the floor, almost out of frame, A small wooden object filled with burning coals, next to a Cupid tile, in the exact spot where there once was a wicker basket that Vermeer chose to replace, specifically, with that object and not another. The foot warmer symbolized the warmth of desire. The Cupid pointed in the same direction, and the jug on the table completed the vocabulary. What does this mean for the maid who stands there, focused, pouring milk with absolute calm? Does it mean Vermeer was suggesting that beneath that focus, beneath that silent work, there was an emotional interior that the domestic scene did not show but did contain? There is no definitive answer. Some point out that the whitewashed wall and the presence of milk suggest the room was a cold kitchen, used for dairy products, and that the foot warmer could have a functional explanation, even if the maid is not using it. Others point to the combination of the foot warmer with the Cupid tiles and the jug, and conclude that the accumulation of symbols cannot be accidental. What nobody disputes is that Vermeer made an active decision to replace the wicker basket with the foot warmer. What nobody disputes is that this man painted 36 pictures in 43 years with an obsessive precision, and that nothing in his compositions was accidental. And what nobody disputes is that for 350 years that object was there, visible, in plain sight. And most of us looked at it without seeing it. Part 10. The End. This is the story of a painting that was always more complex than it appeared. It was not necessary to uncover a buried secret. It was not necessary to restore a hidden image. The foot warmer was always there. The Cupid tiles were always there. The jug was always there. What was lost was not the object. It was the dictionary, the visual vocabulary that Vermeer's contemporaries used naturally, and that the passage of time slowly erased. And what the technology of 2023 has given back is not a new secret, it is an old conversation we had forgotten to have. Vermeer died insolvent in 1675. He was forgotten for almost 2 centuries. He returned to history thanks to a French critic who refused to let him disappear. And today, 350 years later, the largest exhibition of his work in history brought together 650,000 people from 113 countries, people who queued, who paid resale prices of nearly $3,000 to be in the same room as his 36 paintings. It was not just to see the technique. It was not just to see the light. It was because there is something in those paintings that never quite finishes revealing everything it holds inside. And the small wooden object on the floor of the Milkmaid, next to a Cupid painted on a cheap tile, placed there deliberately instead of a wicker basket that Vermeer erased so it would not be there, is exactly the reason we keep looking.